There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is your mountain. Welcome, everybody, to the Your Mountain podcast. I'm your host, David Williams, and before we jump into this episode, I want to ask that you all head out and subscribe to this podcast. Go to iTunes, go to Stitcher, go to Google Play, wherever you find it, wherever you find your podcasts. Head out there and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave us a rating. Leave us a comment. We'd really appreciate it. I'm calling this one a special episode. And as always, Nephi Cole and Mike McGrady are both here. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Dave.
So I'm calling this a special episode because this will be our first long-form episode where we don't have a formal guest with us.
Except Dave's imaginary friend.
I don't even have an imaginary friend.
That's sad.
I know. If I did, he could meet yours, and they'd probably go out and play on the playground together and all that sort of stuff. But I don't have one.
Sorry. My imaginary friend beat up your imaginary friend.
Yeah, right. I need a bumper sticker that says that. Yeah.
They don't get along.
Yeah, I don't know if they would get along. Maybe they would. But anyway, this is special in a way, in a couple of ways. One, because this is the first one where we haven't had a guest.
Yeah, but there's a reason.
There's a reason, right? And that's the second special reason.
Yeah.
So in all of these episodes when we have guests, we end our show, we ask them, what's your mountain? What's that place that's so special to you, so meaningful to you? What's your mountain? And tell us a little bit about it. And that's been one of my absolute favorite segments of our show.
Yeah.
Because people really open up. They share some pretty personal, sometimes emotional experiences about these places that mean so much to them.
Yeah, I know when we interviewed the Mullers that I mentioned that I always try to predict where someone's mountain and what it is, where it is, any of that. I never get it right. And just a little insider baseball, we've always had this question. It's always been teed up. It's always been part of the show. We just forgot to ask Ranella.
Did we not ask him?
No, we didn't.
We didn't ask him.
We had that question
we didn't
written.
ask him.
Yeah, it was something we had talked about, how it really helped define our podcast.
Dang it!
And our very first episode.
Looks like we have a follow-up podcast to do.
Guess we got to get him back, right? Somehow we got to get him back.
Yeah, I remember we were flying back out of Seattle, and I was sitting on the plane. Oh, we forgot to ask.
We didn't even ask that question. But it's become a staple of ours, I think.
It's a great part.
We've been at this for a little while now, and we've had a lot of great guests tell us about their mountain. And I got to thinking when we did episode 19, and that was that episode on the history of forest management in the United States. It was at that time, while we were doing that episode, and we were talking about new fires that were out there and the changing fire regime as a result of some of the management practices that have been going on around the country the past 100 years. During that time, my mountain was burning. And so...
Well, yeah, and that burning was why we did that episode.
That burning was why we did that episode. It sort of triggered something in me, and I'm like, we got to talk about forest management.
It sparked a passion within Dave. For
did.
Those that are listening. I mean, him and I were talking about it because I've been to where Dave's going to talk about, but we were going through it, and we have to cover this issue. We just have to do it. And he was fired up and he was ready to write articles and do a podcast and do all those things. And it just sort of dawned on us in our conversation that we need to capture the moment and the passion on Dave's mountain.
It's easy to talk about forest management when you can talk about it in an antiseptic way, and you go to a spot in the landscape that you've never been to and you take a snapshot of it and you talk about that in an antiseptic way. It's real different when you look at an area that you have known over years and you see something happen there.
I'm as guilty of this as the next person is, probably everybody around this table and everybody listening. I read newspaper articles, I watch news reports, and you hear about these gigantic fires burning. And you hear about the homes lost, the property lost, the acreage lost, these places just gone. And for the most part, these are places I've never been. These are places I've never seen. These are places I don't have memories of. Although you want to be empathetic, you want to have that that emotion, that you just, that heartfelt sorrow for what people are going through. And don't get me wrong, I feel horrible for what people are going through, but there's a detachment because it's not personalized, right? Well, you see it on the news.
Before you tear up too much, just get him a Kleenex for Northern. But I mean, this is a place you've hunted a lot, and so when I say that, I mean you're getting ready to go elk hunting now, right?
I am. I'm leaving tomorrow morning.
Yeah, tomorrow morning. Well, great timing, by the way. I drove over here. It's for those that don't know, which will be nobody. It's literally the middle of the night. That's where we record most of the only time we can get away. So like our kids all go to sleep, and we're running on different temperatures of caffeine depending on who it is, or something else. And sitting here, and I drove over, and it is literally a blizzard. I drove over, and in the last 2 hours, we probably had 6 inches of snow, and it's wet snow.
It's like spring snow in fall time.
I'm going to have to dig my car out to get out of here.
Yeah. It is amazing. I'm leaving tomorrow for an elk hunt if the roads are open and let me get out. And we're going to see record low temperatures. It's the wind chill. What did we look? We saw
negative 15.
Negative 15 wind chill tomorrow night.
Yeah. Any chance you're going to be totally wearing cotton?
Probably. I'm going to be tent camping. Probably guaranteed that I will be wearing cotton or some kind of polyester fiber.
Yeah. When Nephi showed up, that was right when I was pleading with Dave to wear something other than his sweatshirt.
So I have this. Don't take my advice, right? Do as I say, not as I do.
No, just don't do as you say.
Don't do as I say either.
Just don't ask Dave.
Because Mike and I have been hunting for a number of years, and we've had days where you look in the truck dash before you get out and start kicking around, and it's 30 below Fahrenheit ambient temperature.
Yeah, that's not even wind chill.
Not even wind chill.
Granted, when it was that low, there was no wind.
Right. And I just wear a sweatshirt and an old beat up orange vest that I've got.
Yeah, so some people go like a traditional archery setup to make it the harder on themselves. Like you're the opposite. You'll like your traditional setup is just find the most archaic clothing that you can.
Yeah, no, it's not archaic. Well, it is archaic, but it's not that he's going to find it. It's just that's what's there.
It's there. It was free. I've had it for 20 years. It seems to function all right.
So the reason I bring that up,
I've only had one near-death experience wearing it.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is you're headed out. I mean, how many years have you been hunting your mountain?
Well, so what's interesting is
this place
I'm not hunting my mountain this time because my mountain is on fire.
Yeah. So how many years? When was the first year you hunted there? Well,
so when I was a kid in Wyoming, the legal age to hunt was 14. To hunt big game was 14. Now it's 12. Some other states it's 10. In Wyoming it's 12. But it was 14. So the first year that I went and carried a rifle, I was 14. But I'd been going there before that.
So you went there with your dad?
I went there with my dad. My dad started hunting this place. I don't know. It's been more than 40 years ago. And you know, when we moved to Wyoming, this was the place he started hunting, and he was brought into a group that had been hunting this place for 40 years prior or more. I mean, so this is something. It goes back a long, long time. The tradition, the camping spots, the hunting locations.
What year did you take your first bull there?
Oh boy! So the first
elk there. Maybe that's better.
First elk year would have been.
How old were you?
I was 14 that first year.
So you took an elk your first year hunting there.
My first year hunting there was a cow, late season cow. Remember it so vividly. In fact, I wrote an article about it in Bugle. It was in Bugle magazine. For those that don't know, that's the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation's publication. Last year, wrote this article, and it was actually an article about an article of clothing.
Yeah, it was about your orange vest.
It was about my orange vest that my dad gave me when I turned 14 for hunting. And
I really.
It's
Nephi. Have you seen the vest in person?
I have. I'm surprised at the thing. I can't believe that it doesn't the hanger doesn't just rip through it when you hang it up.
So I've had that vest for 25 years.
Well, yeah, we know.
The zipper doesn't work. I've analogized it to...
Which is good, because you couldn't get it over here.
You do know you can get a new zipper.
Yeah.
You might
have to get a panel, though.
But it impacts the character of this vest.
Wide so that you could, fit in your vest.
It impacts the character of the vest.
Some elastic.
I'm not a morbidly obese man. Like you're trying to...
You're not a 14-year-old boy.
My dad bought it so I'd grow into it.
Mission accomplished.
It took me a lot of years to grow in, but I've as you can probably gather, I still wear this vest today. This vest that I wore on my mountain for the very first elk that I killed, and it was a cow elk. I remember it vividly because the night before, we were camping out there in a huge snowstorm, not unlike the one we're going through right now. It was a relatively early. It was in November, but still a big snowstorm for that time of year. We had to dig through about 2 feet of snow to be able to just set the tent up. And I was 14, and my hands got just frigid cold. And I just remember we ended up, after we got this tent set up, we ended up sitting in the truck. It was I think it was an old Jeep Wagoneer. I can't remember if he still had the Jeep Wagoneer at the time or if he'd moved on to something else, but it was this old vehicle. We sat in the cab of that for 40 minutes, maybe more, just to warm up enough so we could strip down to our skivvies and get in our sleeping bags. It was because we were just so cold to the core.
Little secret: Dave can wear a sweatshirt in -30 ambient temperature if he has gloves on.
That's a fact.
Hat and gloves is all he needs.
That's a fact. You got to have, and good socks. You got to have your feet warm, your head warm, your hands warm, and then my core's fine. I can wear a sweatshirt, my core's fine.
Yeah.
But I got to have warm hands. If my hands get cold, my life is over. It's just ruined. My experience is ruined. I'm just miserable all day. So I work pretty hard to keep my hands warm and my head warm. Yeah.
He's got those gloves that have the fingers that pull through, but the floppy
ears.
He's constantly flopping them as we're walking down the trail.
So that's the first year you hunted this place. I mean, it's been a long time. So
yeah, that was 14, back in probably 1992, 93.
How many total elk do you think you've taken out of there?
Oh man, I don't know.
Just take a shot in the dark. Don't count them all. He's sitting here on his fingers. He's like,
I don't know, a lot. I mean, so here's how I describe it.
So it's a lot. Like, is that an actual number, Mike?
Yes, it's measurable.
It's between.
I killed one there last year, so I killed my first elk there, my first deer, my first moose, first and only moose, my first blue grouse dusky, right? My first duck, believe it or not, I shot off of a stock pond, not a stock pond, it was a beaver pond up on this mountain.
It's Dave's first base. That's what it sounds like.
It was, yeah. It's my first It wasn't my first. I didn't take any women up there, so I didn't have any of those firsts up there.
No, but you're analogizing it to your first kiss.
It's sort of.
Well, man,
but it was. I mean, it's the place where I experienced a lot of things.
It's a neat area. I've been up there, and I haven't been up there with you, and so I can't guarantee I've been at the exact same spot. But I've seen enough, and I've been enough around that country to know that I think I know where it is. But I would not spoil it by claiming to know exactly or asking where it is, because I know you covet it so much. It's someplace that's so special to you.
It's special, but there's some interesting things about it. It's not like it's this unspoiled virgin wilderness. It's not like it's this super high country. Like when you think of the Rocky Mountains, you think of like the Wind River Range or the Front Range of Colorado with these towering peaks.
No, it's fair to say that if you leave to hunt after work, you can probably get there before it gets dark.
Depends on where you work
and what time of year.
Yeah.
No, it's a haul. It's a haul to get.
It's a couple hours.
You have to commit to get there. It's about 3 hours.
Yeah. To me, that's not
maybe more
that
than that.
far.
Maybe more than that. I don't want to give away.
Yeah,
I'm giving away a little more than I want to give away here.
People think it's Kurt Gowdy. No, don't worry.
But the point is, it's not this untouched, pristine place with these incredible vistas. In fact, when you go back and look at the history of this place, I mean, it's amazing that it exists at all, or that it existed at all. I mean, you had Union Pacific Railroad history, right? So the Union Pacific cuts through southern Wyoming, south central Wyoming, central Wyoming, whatever. You can see it on the map. You see all the checkerboard. That's find the middle of it. That's where the Union Pacific goes. Checkerboard being the private state ownership patchwork that you see, or not private state, private federal ownership patchwork that you see across the West. Anyway, you see it run through Wyoming. Well, so this area was used by tie hackers originally as the Union Pacific was coming across. They'd come up there and they'd cut logs and they'd float them down creeks, right, that had just enough water to be able to float logs down. So tie hackers would float them down the creeks to the rivers, and then they'd be used from there to help build the railroad. When I hunted up there, you could still see the stumps from where they cut those off, where those trees were cut off by tie hackers, 130 years ago. Those stumps still existed, and there were a lot of them, right? And that tie hacking continued from the 1870s into the 1930s and beyond. So it was incredibly touched there. The other thing about it is I have waypoints marked on my GPS, like everybody does, right? That still uses GPSs. I guess a lot of folks use other methods too, but you still mark your waypoints, these points of significance. And a couple of the points that I use, that I mark, are some old mining cabins. These old cabins that are buried deep in the woods that you just sort of stumble upon, that are surrounded by spruce and fir, and you've got a downfall tree leaning across the top of it, but it's still got its structural integrity there.
Right, no roof, just walls.
Just walls. A couple of them have roofs still, but most of them don't. They're just the walls. But I've been known to hunt in those cabins and use the old windows as gun rests, and wait for elk to wander by through there. And those are remnants of, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a not just a gold rush, but a copper rush. The prospectors were coming out and staking their claim to places and mining, trying to mine copper and gold. And the tailings are still there. So the mounds where they would dig out the earth around these cabins, you still have the mine tailings there.
So in your time, going from 14-year-old David Wilms to 47 now.
Don't age me, jeez.
No, but going, over time, if you had to say, like, okay, this is percentage of dead trees. We're gonna go pre-fire by a year. Percentage of dead trees. How did you see it change from 14 years old to almost 40.
Holy smokes. Unrecognizable. The difference. I mean, it's
you got to
so
quantify.
I'm going to. So let me put it this way. So when I was 14, we started hunting out there, and we'd walk through the trees. Because you know that one of my favorite ways to hunt is not sitting out in a big, wide open place glassing for miles and miles. You've called me. What have you called me in the past?
The Timber Ninja.
Timber Ninja, right? Yeah.
Because you like that? You like that Timber Ninja?
That'll work better than hefty.
Because one of my favorite ways to hunt is just to tiptoe through the woods. And you could tiptoe through the woods when I was 14. In fact, you could watch your feet and you could miss. There was enough space you could miss little twigs on the ground. There wasn't a lot of deadfall. There was some deadfall around, but it had been pretty well picked clean because there had been so much timber harvest in the past. Some parts of this forest have been clear cut in the past, but this place where I really particularly like to hunt was, like I said, it was used by a lot of tie hackers for the railroad and other things, and so it was easy walking. You could cover miles easily. It was quiet walking, and the trees were, most of them were probably 60 to 100 years old. Right? So they're mature lodgepole forest, relatively mature lodgepole forest. So that's how it was when I was 14. And you had, if I would hunt on clearings, for example, on south-facing slopes, some of the draws would have aspen working up those draws. And what I'd see from the time I started hunting there at 14 until present day was those aspens slowly being overtaken by pine trees.
Getting choked out. So the aspen were, weren't seeing a lot of new aspen growth. The regeneration just wasn't happening.
Right. It wasn't happening. And it's like we talked about in that last podcast on forest management, because there was a fire suppression policy. The Forest Service has had a strict fire suppression policy for so long. So that's how it was. And then, it was probably in, probably in around 2000, 1999, 2000, something like that. Go up there, and for the first time, you always would see the occasional dead tree, right? Standing dead tree, occasional tree that would have that rust color to the needles, pine needles, right? And it was caused by pine beetle. Pine beetle had killed the tree and it had turned to rust. But it was probably in about 2000 where it just seemed like you couldn't take two steps without seeing a tree. The forest was red. It was like, I'd say it was almost like being in the Northeast during the fall, taking a colors tour in the fall. This entire pine forest was rust colored, right? This entire forest. And when I say the entire forest, I mean, in places, 80 to 90% of all standing trees killed by this pine beetle in the span of just 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's the opposite. You used to see one tree.
Yeah.
That was dying or whatever.
Yeah.
And then now you're looking out at a sea of red and you're seeing one tree that's green.
Yeah. In fact, the only stuff at the time that was green was the stuff that had been clear cut 20 years earlier, 25, 30 years earlier. And you could see the clear cut. I used to sit on this rock and I could look across a valley to a mountain that was probably, I don't know, as the crow flies, it was probably 5 miles. And there were a lot of clear cutting on this mountain. And when that beetle kill hit, you could see the outline of every single clear cut because the rest of the mountain was just rust colored.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth bringing up and noting because we're talking about forest management here in this issue. So you're talking specifically about, issues related to a place very special to your mountain.
Yeah.
And we're talking about fire, we're talking about beetles, but I don't want people to get the misunderstanding or to believe that this forest management issue is just a beetle issue. And to illustrate that point, I want to talk a little bit about the Yellowstone fires.
Yeah.
So I have a good friend who has a very similar experience to yours, and I'm going to change the names, not of the good friend, but of the location to protect to protect this spot. But let's just say it's a place called Campbell Creek, and so near Campbell Creek, which is close to Jellystone National Park, but Campbell Creek, they had fires that came out of Jellystone and just burned a lot of country, and initially, he said, he used to hunt around this area, Campbell Creek, with family. And he took me there one year, but he said, elk hunting was great initially because of you burn and then stuff comes in. You've got, grasses you can see, and but the problem was in this area that over time they didn't let anybody come in and clean up, that standing dead, from a fire. And it wasn't it just left standing dead. So some fires are more severe than others. This one, I don't think was necessarily that catastrophic in and of itself in terms of the heat, but it just left everything, just all these just standing poles, right? Mm-hmm. And then 20 years later, they were all blown down.
Right.
And nobody had removed them. And so there was we went up there hunting, and I remember taking horses in, and you had to follow a path that was literally cut with a chainsaw through, to move horses through there. And if the path was not cut, where the path was not cut, you could not go. And this, it was like going through a set of corrals. Mm-hmm. It was so bad. And so there's an area there called Western, and changing the name, Western Gulch. So we went up to this location called Western Gulch, and we saw, and this was with my good buddy Cody Arnold, and so we were up there and we saw we saw a herd of elk on the opposite side of Western Gulch. And so we're going to get over there, and we watched them bed down and started putting the sneak on to get over these elk. And it took us quite a while to get over to where the elk were at. And the infuriating thing to me about this is, at the time we were having a huge discussion, much like you and I have arguments about gear, Cody and I about gear selection. And so as I'm all camoed out, he's hiking up the opposite ridge looks like the Great Pumpkin, just a giant orange coat. And so
I got to tell you, Mike and I have been in a situation where you wanted as much orange as possible. I would have worn orange pants in this situation.
You wanted flares.
Yeah,
we were the only people in that area, but
because Mike and I got shot at one year.
Yeah, well,
they technically were elk between us and them.
Trying
but they
to
were
make this the short version. We figured when we got to the opposite side of the gulch, we could have come back around on the top of the bowl and of this this kind of, it was a bowl, BOWL. We could have come around, probably been about 4-mile hike to get back around from one side to the other. So we cut back through the center of it. The deadfall was so bad that literally going the last half of the trip, we were walking, and we were walking on like teeter-totters the entire way. We were 3 feet off the ground, just walking on matchstick timber the entire way. We did not touch the floor. We did not touch the dirt. Like, it was that bad. And it was just amazing to me that,
and that was in a burn area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like, so I've been to Dave's Mountain. We've hunted there. That's the same thing, but rather than 3 feet, you're 10 feet at times.
Yeah. You never saw the place before beetle kill. You don't know what the place was like without beetle kill.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But so back to my mountain, right? That beetle kill hit, and for the next 5 years or so, maybe even more than that, 5-7 years, still hunting there. Not a lot of deadfall, all just standing dead. But you knew the inevitable was gonna come. Right? You knew the inevitable was gonna come, and when it started happening, I don't even know how to put into words the impact. And I'm not talking just from a hunting standpoint. So national forests are supposed to be multiple use landscapes, right? There are grazing allotments up there, right? There's hunting that goes on up there. There's backpacking. There's hiking and fishing. There's all sorts of activities that occur or are supposed to occur on these national forests. And the best way I can describe this, after the beetle kill and after the trees started to fall, is you went from a multiple use landscape to, frankly, almost a no use landscape. There's no way for livestock to use. I mean, there's still grazing allotments up there, but the livestock tend to stay now in the open meadows, open fields, and they can't work through the timber. It was so bad. Right? Mike's right. There were places where the deadfall was so bad that you'd be climbing over things, and all of a sudden you'd look down and you realize, holy smokes, I'm 15 feet off the ground. Mm-hmm. Because that was the path of least resistance to get over or around deadfall. One experience stands out in my mind, and Mike was there for this one, stands out in my mind above all others, about the seriousness and the danger of hunting in this kind of changing forest when all the trees are dying or dead and have been dead. So there was already a significant amount of deadfall at this time. And I'd say, I don't know what this was, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it sounds right. About 4.
Probably 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So there was a significant amount of deadfall at this time already. But this was the year that it seemed like we went from having a fair amount of deadfall to just everything fell. And so we woke up one morning, and actually the day before we had packed a buddy's elk out. Mm-hmm. We woke up this morning and the wind was just whipping. I mean, we're camped in a small tent in a small clearing in the middle of the woods that normally the wind could be whipping, you wouldn't feel it. And it's whipping the tent around. You can just tell where we'd normally start hunting out in a big clearing, wind like we'd never experienced before. So we said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to hike through the timber out to this boggy area that we like to sit and see if we can catch any elk moving through.
Well, first we went by those cabins you were talking about.
We did go by those cabins, yeah.
Yeah, then we went to the bog.
And we went to this bog. And so we decided to sit over this bog and see, maybe we'll stumble some elk. And we're sitting, I don't know how far apart. I don't know.
50 yards?
50 yards maybe.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you is when a tree falls in the forest and you're there to hear it, it scares the ever-loving crap out of you.
So it does make a sound. It makes a terrifying sound.
A terrifying sound.
And there was 3 of us there. So, yeah. Matt was there.
Yeah, that's true. So there were 3 of us there. It makes a terrifying sound. And when 20 of them fall and you're watching them all fall, you start to think, am I going to make it out of this alive?
Yeah, so we're sitting there over the bogs, and at least every 60 seconds, trees coming down. And
that we can see.
And every one of them sounds like it's right over top of you. And, I mean, our plan was to be there for a couple of hours.
And I don't know. We had sat there for maybe 40 minutes, maybe an hour. I don't know. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say. And we're in dense timber. I mean, it's not like we're out in the open. We're in dense timber where we can't even really see each other 50 yards away. It's pretty dense. Yet, I would say in that hour, I probably watched 20 trees fall.
Yeah.
Watched. And I can't see 50 yards. They're falling all around us. They're practically falling on top of us. And we make a decision then that it is unsafe to be there. It is absolutely unsafe. And it's unsafe not just to sit there, but it's unsafe to be in the woods, to be walking in the woods at all.
At some point, one of us was thinking, we got to get out of this.
I know.
We got to hike back to camp, and then we got to drive out of this.
Yeah, so we got back to camp, and we had to drive down a 2-track through these woods where trees were falling all around. And in the time that we had come in and set up camp, we'd had half a dozen trees fall across the road. So we're driving out, and we're stopping, and we have to stop and get out the chainsaws and cut our way out. And as we're sawing, it's like we have to have somebody watching the trees while the other person is sawing, because you can't hear when you got that chainsaw running. You can't hear if a tree's starting to come down on you. We don't know if it's going to come down on the truck, so we have somebody that's watching to be able to signal if a tree's coming down to stop that chainsaw to get out of the way. And we cut our way out of there as trees were falling all around us, and we got out of there. And I'm like, I mean, this is my mountain. This is the place that means most to me of any place. I'm like, I don't know if I can ever go back there again. I don't know if I can ever hunt this place again. Because it's so unsafe. So I say we went from having this multiple use forest to...
And that was about 20 years after you killed your first elk.
Yeah.
Out there.
Yeah.
And so in that amount of time.
You shot a moose there, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I shot a moose
First
there
of all,
too.
who did you pay to get that tag?
People give me a hard time about that because when I drew that tag...
Have we told the story before on the podcast?
We've alluded to it.
Yeah. When I drew that tag, I happened to be representing... I was the attorney representing the Game and Fish department.
Oh, and you drew.
And I drew.
What a giant coincidence.
And folks just assumed that I had max preference points, and so it was just my turn, batter up. That wasn't the case at all. I hit it on the lottery, the random. A certain number of licenses go to non-preference point holders and go on the random. I hit it on the random.
What are the chances of winning that?
That year it was 0.2%, 0.2% chance of drawing that tag.
Yeah, it wasn't the only thing you drew that year, though.
Wasn't it?
No, I believe you also drew another tag that was similar to where you're going tomorrow.
Oh, I did draw that tag that year.
Mm-hmm.
Did I? No, I don't think I did. I don't think I drew it that year.
Yeah.
Maybe I did. I don't know. Yeah, it was a good draw year.
So you drew the tag.
So I drew the tag. Yeah.
Yeah. The hard tag to get.
It's probably the most difficult moose tag to draw in the state of Wyoming. It's certainly viewed as a trophy unit. There's lots and lots of moose around. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I drew that tag.
And you went up there with a buddy. You took Matt Hubler.
Matt Hubler was a good man.
Why on earth would you, first of all, be friends with Matt Hubler, and second of all, just kidding, Matt.
So Matt's a good guy. Matt's a good
Matt's
friend.
Matt's a great guy to play. He's funny.
And he's a pack mule. And he packs moose.
He does, yeah. And he'd want me to say that he's a photographer extraordinaire, because he took some pictures of me packing the moose out. Someday I want to tell that I want Matt to be here when I tell that moose story, because that was it's another reason why this mountain is so it's such a fabric of my being.
It's also why you only have one thumb.
Not me. It wasn't me.
Oh,
that was Hubler.
Sorry, Matt.
But that's a piece of the story.
Sorry about your thumb.
That's a piece of the story. See the pun there? Piece. No. Anyway, that's a story for another day, because that was an amazing experience. A lot of work was successful in getting a moose. But yeah, so that was man, that was my mountain. And the thing about that pine beetle, I want to go back to it really quick, because from a purely biological standpoint, I think we talked about it on our earlier podcast about forest management, it didn't have to happen this way. I mean, the end result, at least, maybe the pine beetle outbreak was going to occur, right? Maybe it wouldn't have been as bad if we'd had different management techniques over the past 100 years, if we didn't have the same fuel load. We talked about before, there's twice as much biomass in the forest as there was in historic times, right? Maybe we could have prevented it. It's all in hypotheticals. Maybe it would have happened anyway. There's actually some records. There's a great book out there written by a professor of mine from college, Dennis Knight. it's mountains. I think it's called Mountains and Plains. Anyway, it talks about, and I was just reading it the other day, rereading it, and I do it every now and again, because he wrote this book before the pine beetle outbreak actually occurred, before we had this massive outbreak, and he had identified that these have happened in the past. Every 100 years or so, you have a big pine beetle outbreak. So maybe we were due. We have these other factors that certainly contributed to it. Maybe it was worse than it would have been, but perhaps we were due. But how did we respond to it? And that's the thing that's so frustrating from my standpoint, is I walked under these trees. I hunted on this mountain for 5-6 years after the pine beetle had come through, just waiting, just hoping that the Forest Service would approve some kind of a timber sale in there, that something would happen to allow some of this standing dead to be removed before we have this giant game of pickup sticks, before we have this forest littered with deadfall that you're climbing 10 feet in the air to get over. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about some of the economics, some of the challenges that face the Forest Service in trying to manage this stuff. So one of the challenges that they've had, I know, around the Campbell Creek area, which I mentioned before, and I know that this is an area, it's an issue where you were at. It's an issue throughout the West. Infrastructure. So let's say that, the Forest Service, looking at forest as a renewable resource and as an agricultural commodity. The way for them to manage that was to sell the rights to harvest to a business who's going to buy that, and they're going to be looking at their bottom line. And they're going to be looking at how much it costs them to go in and take stuff out. And when they take it out, they're anticipating that they're going to be able to turn it into a product. And to do that, there's a certain amount of infrastructure that has to be on the ground. Infrastructure that isn't there anymore.
Right.
Infrastructure like mills.
Right.
Infrastructure like
roads.
Like loggers. Like people who have the skill set to go in and do what you need, the equipment you need.
Absolutely.
And we don't have it anymore.
No, you're absolutely right. And we largely don't have it because of, I'm going to, this is going to oversimplify it. I think this is going to oversimplify it a lot. There's probably a lot of other contributing factors, but I look at it as when NEPA came into place, National Environmental Policy Act, when that law came into being, and you have the National Forest Management Act, you have a plan developed in accordance to the with both of those documents. So you go through all the planning required for a forest unit, and part of that would be authorizing a certain amount of timber harvest, right? Then when the Forest Service would go through the process of leasing that for a timber sale pursuant to that management plan, he gets sued. And it wasn't the lawsuits weren't necessarily, let's put it this way. When you file that lawsuit, you know that there's going to be delay. It's going to create delay whether you win or lose. But it's sort of one area of litigation where even losing is winning for the litigants, because you can potentially delay a project long enough that there wasn't any economic viability. And so this continues on.
If you pay the rent because you have a sawmill, and that's how you make a living, you have to have boards coming out of that mill, or pretty soon you can't afford to have that be your job anymore.
Yeah,
you've got to move on and do something else.
You can't wait 5 to 7 years to have a decision for a lease to actually lease sale to go
and
forward.
I think that's I'd call it a dirty secret, but maybe it's, some people might think that that's a good thing, but that's kind of a dirty secret that we see in other policy areas now, where again it's the same tactic, which is that if we litigate long enough, then we're going to force, because in a lot of these instances, and correct me and help me understand this, a lot of the people who are bringing these suits, they're not doing it. They're bringing suits against people who are making a living on those resources. And so whether it be timber, whether it be grazing, whether it be oil and gas, in many cases, the people who are bringing the litigation, they don't depend on that litigation isn't paying the bills for them. Whereas for these other people, harvesting those resources or utilizing those resources are. And so,
so for them, the litigation might be paying the bills because litigation is an advocacy tool, right, to raise awareness for what they're trying to do, and that brings the donation.
You're talking about,
yeah.
And so you're talking about the capacity for a legal firm to, correct. You're saying it does. So basically, to collect. You sue, you collect.
No, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about a pure advocacy position. Like if you're an organization that's an advocacy organization and you happen to have a litigation branch or you pursue litigation, sometimes that litigation is to further your advocacy objectives and it can drive your membership. So
it can drive your fundraising in other ways.
It can drive your fundraising in other ways.
Mm-hmm. So
And so it does in some ways. The lawsuit it does pay the bills because they're pursuing their advocacy.
And without getting, I'm going to take you down a rabbit hole, but you can extricate from it whenever you want to.
Do it.
There are different kinds of NGOs, and so when we look at non-governmental organizations, there are some, and I don't mind naming some of them, like the Nature Conservancy, that are really, they're collecting funds, and for the most case, they're trying to put money on the ground. They're doing conservation on the ground.
Nature Conservancy is a great organization.
They're out there putting up fences and whatever else and creating habitat and trying to look for partnerships. There are other entities that do nothing on the ground.
That's correct.
There are NGOs out there, and I don't know if you want to name one or two, but,
No,
they exist, and when
people know who they are.
Yeah, and as somebody that signs up, like if you get a postcard and you sign up for that entity, you're not signing up to save to buy an acre of elk habitat. You're signing up to pay for advocacy that's going to have a very loud voice, and
strident advocacy.
Strident advocacy that isn't necessarily doing something on the ground.
Yeah, but there's a lot of groups. I mean, a lot, maybe more groups on all sides of the political spectrum that fall into that category that you're talking about than to actually putting resources on the ground. So I don't want to present this as it's a bad thing if you're not putting resources on the ground. There's valuable advocacy organizations out there that are working, legislative, other political means, to affect change through, policy. Those are valuable, and we need those out there, and then there are the others you're talking about that are doing it on the ground. But there are some that take it to an extreme, right? There are some that take it on either side of the equation. There are some that take that advocacy, to an extreme in advancing an agenda that maybe doesn't serve the interests of all people the way a lot of these other NGOs might. I guess that's so I think there's a distinction within the advocacy arena is my point. And what I'd say with a number of the groups that have challenged, that have filed lawsuits, that have done challenges on some of these forest management issues, it's the motive is to get people off forests, to remove. This is my opinion, right? But it appears to be to remove the multiple uses, or at least some of the uses, from the landscape.
Curtail them. Yeah, I've been involved in those litigation. Those kinds of litigation, and usually it is targeted towards some forms of the multiple use, grazing, timber, those kinds of things. It's not the the backpackers and things like that.
Right.
Those are not the issues. It's the more those uses of the landscape which a company's making money.
So,
excuse me, I had to cough.
I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit, so policy, some of the challenges that we have in these forests and challenges on your mountain. in a recent podcast we talked about, we kind of drew straws and talked about opportunities for how you can manage wildlife resources differently. So in a situation like this, what can we do better? How can we make a difference? And I'll start out by saying, telling another story, cooperative partnerships. So I think most of us here know there's a what conservation districts are. Mm-hmm. So conservation districts around the time of the Dust Bowl, when in wisdom we started caring about conservation of soil, when the Soil Conservation Service came into being. They did a really interesting thing. They made a federal agency to worry about conservation of an agricultural resource and of a resource in soil. And at the same time, they went to every state, and states set up local government entities called conservation districts. And they're different in every state. Some of them are, you have elected officials, appointed officials, but these conservation districts are largely, local government is the best way to put it. So there's a really interesting test case in this state. I call it a test case, where they had a conservation district that went in, secured some grant funding, worked to get a mill reopened, and then partnered with the Forest Service and was able to go in, and the Forest Service identified areas that they had to have trees removed. And then rather than paying the conservation district to remove the trees, they allowed the conservation district to remove the trees and then to be able to utilize to be able to sell the product, basically. Mm-hmm. So they were able to go in there using grant funding, using partnerships, and they were able to clean up a whole bunch of forest. And mm-hmm. they were able to put some people to work, and they were able to cover an entire small town basically in log siding. And so what are the solutions? We need, as we said in this other with wild horses, we need a new path forward. What's the path forward? How do we fix this?
Well, the beauty about the forest is, the damage I'm going to call it damage, because I think what we've done over the past 130 plus years is we've damaged things in the forest. I think the forest, the damage can be undone. And I view, for one, the fires that we're seeing, in large part that's undoing a lot of damage we've done. It's removing that biomass. It's releasing the seeds from the serotinous cones to allow forest regeneration. Serotinous cones being, cones from things like lodgepole pine, ponderosa pine, that require heat to open the cone to allow the seed out to be able to establish itself, right? So fire's a good thing, and that's a hard thing to say. Have you gotten there
yet? Like for you, when you see it burning right now, how long is it going to take you before you feel good about it?
Next year when we're
no, it's
hunting.
So it's man, I'm emotional about this because it's the place that my dad taught me everything I know about hunting, about the outdoors. It's where I learned to be an outdoorsman. Right? This was it. And I have little kids myself. And you guys know my oldest, Mike and I are about the same age. She's going to be ready to big game hunt in a couple of years. And I've been dreaming about taking her there with me, with her grandpa, and like showing her my mountain and watching it change in a way that's unusable. Has been incredibly hard, because I know that my daughter's never going to see what I saw as a kid.
Yeah, and
right.
We were on the doorstep of going.
Yeah,
so we were going to go this year. We had deer tags.
We actually drew tags, and Dave and I were going to take our oldest daughters
to hunt this area,
to be able to see it. And she was never going to see it as you did.
No, it was a kid. It was always going to be different.
She was going to see it as I knew it.
Right.
until the fire.
So this fire, and I haven't been over there. It's still closed. The fire's still burning. The area's still closed. There's a restriction put in place by the Forest Service to prevent people from getting in there for safety reasons. So it's still burning. This snow we're getting is going to go a long way to knocking it down, right? It's going to be hard to go there the first time. I've been saying for years, I've been saying this place needs to burn. And I say, I'm like this
tongue in cheek every year. That's what we would say.
I always say, on our way out, let's just light a few matches and, leave a trail for us to, just tongue in cheek. But I mean, the fact is this forest needed to burn because we'd done such a poor job managing it for so long, and we missed an opportunity. I'm convinced we missed an opportunity to prevent it from burning like this. We may have still had some fires, but not fires like we're having. If we'd been able to get in there and remove some of this when it was standing dead, before it was unsalvageable. So it's going to be incredibly, incredibly hard to go back there next year and see it so different. The same token, now I'm going to be able to take my daughter to this. It's going to be a new place to me. It's going to feel like a new place. I just know it. It's going to feel like a new place to me. I'm going to be able to take her there, and we're going to be able to experience this rebirth, regrowth, regeneration of this place that's been so important for so long. We're going to get to experience that together, which I think is that's going to be pretty cool. And that's the way I'm trying to look at it is she was never going to know my mountain. The way she's going to know my mountain is through my stories and my experiences and telling her what it used to be. She was never going to see it. But to get to your point of what can we do differently? Oh man,
before you get there,
yeah.
I want to challenge you.
Yeah.
So this is a new beginning. I want you to bury your vest up there.
Bury my vest up there?
I want you to dig a big hole. I want you to put that orange vest in there.
I will not accept your challenge.
Open a new chapter. Your mountain it's going to be beautiful.
I will not accept that challenge. I intend to wear that vest.
Think about this.
I will bury
that vest. That deserves to be up there.
That vest will either get buried as ashes.
It will be buried up there
over a suit in your coffin.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
And if it's in ashes, it will probably be spread on that mountain. So my vest will be up there, but it might be a while.
It's not orange anymore.
So you're not going to give your daughter the vest, huh?
I don't think she'll ever grow into it. But I'm going to get her.
She could take it in.
Getting her own vest. But I do want to. I want to get back to your question of, how.
Yeah, we can go back to serious answers.
What can we do differently? And I don't know what you guys think. I don't have a great answer. I think fire is going to happen, and it needs to happen in a lot of these places because it's unusable right now. I think we've got to address this problem that we've got, the time it takes to go through the processes to approve projects has become excessive. And then the avenues for litigation as a means to not just delay, but to stop projects, I think is a problem as well. And I don't want folks to think I'm sitting here saying, man, I am pro cutting down the forest, right? That I'm pro getting in there and putting in new roads all over the place and getting into these places that were that had no roads before, and we're going to get in there. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is we can't let this happen again. I kind of view fire as nature's reset button, and we got to learn from some of these mistakes we had. We can't use fire suppression as like the holy grail of forest management. Just like we can't say no management at all, no treatment of any kind as far as whether it's prescribed fire or timber removal. We can't say that we can't do that, either. we've talked about this on other episodes. We got to have a toolbox of options to use in the forest, right, to be able to manage it.
This is interesting. This is interesting to me because I kind of think that we can step back from 20,000 feet and draw some real parallels between this issue and so many others.
Agreed.
There's and I'm a special interest too, I guess, right? In some ways, like maybe hunting to me, maybe I'm a special interest group because I'm a hunter. And so, but it's interesting and unfortunate. I think that sometimes I think we really just need to trust professionals. And we don't necessarily do it all the time as individuals. Maybe as professionals, maybe in our careers we do. But as individuals, I think it's hard sometimes to say, you know what? There's some professional foresters out there. They're really good. We need to give them some more deference. We need to let them do their jobs. There's some professional land managers out there with BLM. We need to give them some deference, let them do their jobs. There's professional game managers, biologists out there who are really good at what they do. Mm-hmm. We need to let them do their jobs and let ourselves get educated and try and educate others, and listen to them. And when these professionals are, giving us their best, we need to trust them. And it seems like, that's a place we have to try and get back to and find a way to get there, because over the last 20 years, it's become a lot more popular to question and litigate them than to try and give them the slack to do their jobs.
Although what's funny, it's not funny. I don't know why I said funny, but you're trained as a scientist. I've been trained as a scientist. And I remember, and this is where I think it's so hard because we're so attached to our certain places, right? And so I remember a forest plan going through on my mountain, right? Probably 15 years ago. And there was a proposal to shut down a whole host of roads out there. I wrote in objecting to that plan. The scientists were saying, the biologists were saying, the land managers were saying, it'll be better for wildlife. We need to shut these roads down. It'll be better for wildlife. It'll be better. It'll prevent erosion. And I'm sitting there thinking, now I'm going to have to walk a lot farther. And I'm thinking, is it really going to be that much better for wildlife in these spots? I mean, this is the kid in me, right? This was the young adult in me, not really understanding things. But I was questioning the managers back then on this policy because I thought it was going to limit my access, and I thought I'd been hunting there long enough to know that that road isn't there aren't erosion problems there. You should keep that open. What ended up happening? We actually convinced, I don't know if we convinced, but when the final plan went through, not all the roads were closed. A couple of the ones that we really harped on staying open, they left open. And now, and I think Mike probably knows which one I'm talking about, there's at least one of those that's complete, and then I'm going to circle back to your point. It's completely impassable now because it's eroded out. So the roads are eroded out so much that you can't get a truck down it anymore. And so it turns out they were right and should have
gone to grad school. Should have
trusted
got a
them,
master of science.
Right.
Yours truly, master.
I know, but science. You know what I've said. It's not my fault that it took you 2 extra years to acquire the knowledge that I was able to acquire in just the 4.
Master of science.
Yeah.
Well, so you wrote in and you participated in a process, but it's not unreasonable for the Forest Service in this instance to consider your objections, because when you think about it, the managers on the forest, they come and go. They shift around, they get moved to some other location, and it's just the nature of the way that particular department works. Whereas you're describing to me the continuity of multiple generations on that landscape that have hunted out there.
Sure.
And so you, your father, and the people that your father hunts with, have more of a tie and an understanding of what has happened out there than someone that shows up that is a professional that's writing that plan. And so I guess I don't have too many problems with them listening to them.
It's the same reason. Yeah, I agree with you. And it's the same reason why I pretty strongly believe that you should, when a landowner that's a fifth generation rancher provides feedback to the BLM or the Forest Service saying, you know what, I know this is what you're saying may happen, but let me tell you, based on 100 years of history, what's actually going on the landscape. And I don't have, as the landowner, they might say, I don't have the masters in science that you might have. But what I do have is multi-generations on this landscape knowing every corner and every crevice of this.
It's more
land.
than anecdotal.
It's more than anecdotal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's science. I mean, that's a type of science.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And you know this. I mean, I worked for the agency I worked for with the federal government was unique because we don't own any land. It was all about collaborative conservation with private landowners. And I truly believe, like Aldo Leopold said, that the future of conservation lies in working with private landowners and private individuals. And so I think that I think the trick is in having that handshake where you can provide technical expertise to people at the local level. But then I don't want this to take too long, but Virginia Probst, had the dynamist principles talk about this concept of allowing decisions to occur at the most basic level, at the most ground, the level closest to the ground possible. That if you really want to succeed in government, you want to succeed in management of any kind, you can't nitpick, you can't write down every little thing that must be done, because then what happens is you get, it just doesn't work. It gets overthought from the, litigated, all these things. The way to make the best laws, to make something work, is from a federal standpoint. If we're going to make a law, we got to make it a generalist law that incorporates and allows people at the local level to succeed or fail, and then allows for accountability and change and dynamic management based on those successes and failures. And ultimately, that's how you get the best result, is by allowing those local people with local knowledge to work with people that have technical expertise to come up with solutions that work in that area. And really, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But when you allow those people to innovate at that most basic level, those people who live in that community, who work and understand those locations, that's where you get the best results.
Well, let's hope that happens. Let's hope we can learn from some of our prior mistakes on forest management, and that we can learn from the collective whole, like you're talking about, the folks on the ground, the folks in the agencies, and that we can chart a path now that we've had, and we're going to continue to have, these big fires around the West. I just don't see anything changing there. We're going to continue to have them. But as our forests start to reset, hopefully we can learn from, past mistakes, and what we're teeing up now to leave for our future generations is something that they can be proud of, and hopefully we can be proud of. It's been pretty serious. Before we sign off, do you mind if I tell you kind of a funny story about my mountain?
Sure.
I guess.
This has been awfully serious. We got to lighten it up a little bit, right?
You're the one. Yes.
I mean, it's serious because it's emotional to me because it's a.
I know.
I mean, and the thing is, I haven't told you. You guys know where it is generally, but I haven't told our listeners where this is. I'm not going to. But I
will. I will. The right amount of money, people.
But I will bet you all the money in my bank, which you know how cheap I am, so I probably have a pretty good bank account at this point. I'll bet you all the money that I've got saved up that everybody out there listening has They don't need to know where this is because they have their own place just like this.
That's right. So just tell them.
No.
Tell them a joke.
It's not really a joke. I'm just telling you. I was going to tell you an experience out there, but everybody has these experiences around their mountain, and so hopefully this kind of resonates with people. This, this sense of loss and that I'm feeling right now, and I probably shouldn't. I didn't lose anything. Any personal property. I still have all of my memories. I lost it was public land that burned that it was just my place, right?
Yeah, you lost your expectation of the continuation of your favorite place.
Current paradigm.
Right. Mm-hmm. So here's, and I'm going to throw my dad under the bus a little bit. So if he's listening, this is said in absolute love. But, so I'm going to tee it up this way. So I was 15 years old. And so, as you know, when I was 14, I killed my first elk. And it was a cow elk. So 15, I drew this cow tag again in the same area. And at the time, it was a late season hunt. It started the same time as everything else, but it ran through the end of November. And just the way it worked, because I killed the elk the year before in November, I thought, that's what I want to go again. Let's kill this next one in November. So I had to take several trips up there because of this one trip. I had to go back because of this one trip. So we were in the truck, and we were driving to the place that we were going to start hiking. And we're on the top of a ridge. There's a road up here that runs along the spine of a ridge. This ridge runs for several miles, and it runs along the spine of this, and it's windswept. All that's up there. Sagebrush, some limber pine, the occasional lodgepole pine, but it's really very open. And in October and November, in these open places up in the high country of the Rockies, the wind just whips, right? And so we'd had some snow, the wind whipped, and it built these drifts. Then the sun came out, and the wind continued to whip, and these drifts got rock hard. And you've experienced those, right? You get out and you can walk on a snowdrift that's 5 feet deep, and nothing happens. So we're driving along the road, and we come to one of these snowdrifts. And the snowdrift is, I don't know how long it is, probably 30 feet, 40 feet long. And it's pretty deep. We stop. My dad gets out, because he doesn't just drive right into it. He gets out, and he walks out onto the snowdrift, and he jumps up and down, and he doesn't break through. And because he could jump up and down and he didn't break through, it probably could support a truck.
Sure.
Yep. So
not a master.
So hops into this and drives into this snowdrift and gets about to the place where he's jumping up and down, and right, just buried it. Just absolutely buried it. So we get out, and or nothing to tie off a winch to, because this is in the wide open. So we have to dig our way back out. And we spent several hours digging our way back out so that he could back out of this thing. And we got out, and I kid you not, he says, "Well, now we can make it." And 2 hours later, we were dug out for a second time. And we abandoned. That was the end of that hunt for the day. We spent our whole day digging out. And that's just one of the millions of experiences that happened up on my mountain. The one I'd leave you with, so we're not leaving it with, my dad doing this. And I love my dad, and he does that sometimes. But that's where I get some of my.
I was gonna say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree there, Dave.
That's where I get some. Yeah, that's where I get some of my go for it momentum. Like, just take a risk here and there, right? I get it from him. So I have some of my own stories like that. Well, one I'd leave you with, and it says, I don't have no idea who these people are. No idea who these people are. But we're over on my mountain I don't know, driving from one walk to another walk, and we've got there's this place. There's a little creek that runs in one of the tire ruts down it's a 2-track down a steep embankment, trees lining both sides, bottoms out at the bottom of this thing, and you have to, it feels like you're just going to run your bumper right into the ground, but there's enough. You can start working up the other side, right? And there's a little creek that runs in the bottom.
Water of the U.S.
It's water of the U.S. Yeah, we'll get into that someday, right? So we pull up to the top of this hill, and we're about to go down. We see there's a vehicle parked at the bottom, and it snowed. There, I don't know, 6-8 inches of snow on the ground, and we see them, and they're probably sitting at about a 25-degree angle, maybe even 30. I mean, it's pretty steep in the bottom of this thing. And they've got a guy on, those big handyman jacks that are like 3.5, 4 feet tall, weigh about 1,000 pounds. Crank them like you're cranking an old well. They're down there jacking up the front end of their truck, trying to put chains on because they got themselves stuck down in the bottom of this thing. So they're trying to put chains on at this angle on, in 6 inches of snow where it's slimy and nasty underneath. And they have this handyman jack, and we're just standing there watching this. We're like, well, this can't go well. And not 30 seconds later, the guy cranking that jack, the car shifts a little bit. That jack shoots out from the force of that car pushing down on it, catches him right between the eyes. All the force of that handyman, and he's flails back on the ground.
Dead.
He is unconscious, and he's got blood just gushing down his face. I mean, down his forehead, his face, and he shakes himself too, and he's sort of sitting up. And his buddy's standing there watching this, and we'd come down to see what was going on. We're like, oh my gosh, this is like he might be dying. Just blood pouring down his face. And his buddy gets in the back of the truck and pulls out a roll of paper towels. They're still attached to the roll, and just puts the roll up to the guy's forehead. It's like, oh, he'll be fine. He's done worse. And it's just, it's those little things that happened out there. Those
make
little
it such a special place.
That make it a special place. All the weird stuff that happens goes along with all the super memorable experiences of, getting your first elk and your first deer and being there with your dad when that happens. And,
I'll tell you what, brother.
Man.
I want to come out there and dig the hole for you.
For my vest? Mm-hmm. Or for me?
Whichever it takes.
You don't have to be in the vest. We can. If you're gonna
negotiable.
Yeah, if you're gonna make this hard, you can do this 2 ways. There's the easy way, there's a hard way.
Well,
I know I don't want to dig a hole that big.
I'm gonna be wearing that vest tomorrow. I'm pretty excited about it. Hey, if you want to know more about that vest, that history of that vest, go read that article. Go find that article. I think it was from the October issue in 2017. The October 2017.
Thanks for sharing some. Thanks for talking about your mount.
Yeah, thanks for indulging me. I really appreciate it. Because
you owe us big time.
I know, but this hit me hard when it went up in flames, and we did that first podcast. This hit me hard. It really hit me hard. I've had a lot of time to reflect. I'm still going to write about it. I had a lot of time to reflect on it, and it'll be fine. Like I said, I didn't lose a house. I didn't lose any personal property. No family was affected. I should be fine with it. I'm still struggling with it. It needed to burn, yet I'm still struggling. But it's going to be good. It's going to come back stronger than ever. I'm excited to check it out next year and see what it's all about. But I'm also excited to, take what I've learned from all of my experiences there and use that to try and, provide information to the decision makers of, this was a problem. This was a problem. And we have an opportunity to do better next time. You guys have any other thoughts?
No, just thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So I guarantee you, as we have more podcasts, stories will come out, other little stories will come out about experiences on my mountain. And at some point, we're going to talk about each one of your mountains because that's only fair. If I have to do this, you have to do this. So we'll do that. Until we do that, just remember, life is about experiences. So go have one.